Demonic paintings, death by arsenic, and intrigue at the court of France. Never a boring day in the life of Rosso Fiorentino, who is serving drama in the late Renaissance period. First of all, imagine living as a painter in the 1500s, late Renaissance, and imagine you're living at the same time as Michelangelo. Leonardo da Vinci is about to die or has just died. Most of the Ninja Turtles have either just died or are about to die, apart from Michelangelo, who's like stubbornly going to live until, very late age for the time, so kind of almost 90, right? Imagine being an artist living at the same times of these rock stars and having to compare your work to theirs continuously. Everyone is comparing you to them, you're comparing yourself to them. That must be very difficult. It must have kind of sucked, right? This is definitely what is the experience of the average artist living in Florence during this period. The artists of this period, we call them mannerists, because what they are trying to do is paint in the manner of the greats of the Ninja Turtles of the time. All right, so they're trying to paint in the manner of Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so basically this is what they're trying to do, and you might think that they are just trying to repeat what others have done, but really a lot of them, or maybe just some of them, find a way to express themselves in their own way after having gone through this process. So they start by copying these great artists, but they end up with expressing something new by doing something very innovative. And you could think of them maybe as a little bit like the missing link between the Renaissance and, or the not missing link, the link between the Renaissance and the Baroque period. So even though they think they are painting, they are sculpting in the manner of the greats, they are taking certain elements, exaggerating those elements, and creating something new. And often later on along the way, they are able to also find their own language and express their own particular viewpoint. All right? Today we're going to be talking specifically about Rosso Fiorentino, who is a great example of mannerism coming out of Florence. So he trains, today I'm cooking up some broccoli, which come from the vegetable garden of Sigrid. Hi Sigrid. So Sigrid has a wonderful vegetable garden, and I'm very lucky to live quite close to her. So a lot of my vegetables come from her vegetable garden, and all my eggs always come from her wonderful chicken. So Rosso Fiorentino. Rosso Fiorentino is raised in around Florence, and he trains under Andrea del Sarto. Andrea del Sarto is the teacher of a lot of the artists of this current of the mannerism of this period, of this area. And Pontormo, for example, who is the same age as Rosso Fiorentino, also trains under Andrea del Sarto. Okay, now at the beginning, we see him really painting in a very direct kind of copycatting Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. But as time goes by, he starts to take on his very defined kind of character, and he becomes very, very recognizable, especially because his characters are often very... they have been described as demonic. Okay, so there is a painting at the Uffizi Gallery, which is famous for having been described exactly in this way. So he gets commissioned to make this Madonna surrounded by saints. This painting had been commissioned by a man who was carrying out the will of a woman who had passed away, who had left in her will that she wanted Virgin Mary with saints painted in her name, in her honor, let's say. And so he was carrying out her will and commissioned work to Rosso Fiorentino. The story has it, now the story this story which I'm about to tell has been passed on to us by Giorgio Vasari, and we have mentioned him in the past, and we have mentioned the fact that his stories have to be taken with a little grain of salt, okay? However, he says that when the Spedalingo, the man who had commissioned this work of art, came to see the painting, which hadn't been finished yet, he was shocked and horrified at seeing these saints and this Madonna, and said that they looked more like demons than they did as saints, okay? And apparently he didn't want this painting any longer. To be fair, there is something to be said about this story, because the way this painting ended was not, it didn't end up in the hands of the person who had commissioned it, and even the saints themselves had to be repainted by Rosso Fiorentino to become different saints altogether, and it ended up in a totally different place as where it had been commissioned to be, okay? And when you look at it, I mean, it is a great example of how there is a bit of a bizarre kind of twist to the paintings of Rosso Fiorentino. I mean, the Madonna looks like baby woke her up at 5 o'clock in the morning, as I was woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning, because she's got like massive dark areas underneath her eyes, and she obviously did not have access to the same makeup I have access to today. The saints also look like they're having a very bad day, and, you know, very thin, very, very, very dramatic. And this is something which is very particular of all of the Mannerist period, is the drama, okay? And Rosso Fiorentino definitely is one of the Mannerist paintings which is serving up most drama among his fellow artists, okay? Another painting which is found inside the Uffizi, before we move on from this particular museum, which is by Rosso Fiorentino, is a painting which I bet you have seen, because it has ended up on a lot of even t-shirts and postcards. It's a very, very famous painting, but often people don't know who it's from. And it is a beautiful little angel playing the lute. A lute is like an old version of a guitar, basically, an old-fashioned version of a guitar. So if you've seen this painting before, now you know who it's by, and you know that he doesn't only paint demonic characters, he can also paint very cute little cherubs, okay? So now I want to move on to the work of art which Rosso Fiorentino is most known for, and is considered to be the highest point in his career, which is a painting that can be found in a museum in Volterra. If you ever go to Volterra, please go and see this work of art, because even though I'm going to show it to you here in this video, you never really experience it fully until you see it in real life. Because, well, first of all, this painting is massive, okay? It's like 10 feet tall. It's two of me, all right? It's really big. So when you walk in the room where it is, you're like hit by just how majestic it is. And very, very theatrical, very, very full of drama, okay? The background is very kind of like, it's like a monotone. It's not a monotone, it's a monocolor, but it's changing tone from dark to light as it's going down. So even that is giving you the idea like you're in a theater rather than in real life. The characters. Now, we have painters during this period which are perfectly capable of creating believable anatomy. However, they choose to twist and modify the anatomy to be more dramatic and to tell more of a story. So, but a perfect example of this is Saint John the Evangelist, which is in the foreground here. And he's like bent over, very, very sad at what's going on, because what's going on is that Jesus has died and he's been taken down from the cross. Saint John, if he was to stand straight, he would be unnaturally tall, okay? He would for sure be a basketball player if he was in real life, right? Other characters here are also just, if you look at them carefully, they're in full pain, but even in an unnatural way, okay? Look at the cloth. The cloth has been described as being painted with a hatchet because it's so angular and so kind of cut at weird ways, in weird ways. Does that make sense? Well, if you see the painting, you know what I'm talking about. the skin of Jesus himself is green almost, okay? So really kind of almost starting some form of decomposition, all right? So lots and lots of drama is happening here. Another very interesting thing about this painting is that we have some unfinished elements to it. So this is something that in our day is very common to find in our paintings, is unfinished elements. So in our contemporary art today, we kind of understand that the process of the painting is an artwork as in itself. So we're not looking for a really, really finished, clean-cut line as we did in the early Renaissance, okay? But it is uncommon to find this unfinished element in artwork from this period. You find it in some works from Leonardo da Vinci, for example. But here, it's like you're not looking for something to be perfectly realistic. You're looking for it to be more expressive. And in certain parts of the painting, you can really feel like this is happening with some really light. The paint itself is very, very light. The strata of paint is really light, and in certain parts you can even see the writing that was on the sketch below. So the color that Rosso Fiorentino wanted to use, he sketched it underneath, and you can even read it underneath the paint. All right, this would have been unacceptable for many artists, but he just leaves it like that. Now, as you can imagine, this kind of approach to art, some people are going to love it and some people are going to absolutely hate it. And this is the reason why Rosso Fiorentino kind of has this role in his life of being this dramatic approach to art is a little bit like a double-edged sword, okay? By the way, the name Rosso means red in Italian. He was nicknamed Rosso because of his red hair. And apparently he also had he was very, very charming as well. So this kind of approach to art, this red hair, this charming character made him very unforgettable, okay? Now, in the sack of 1527, the sack of Rome, he was working in Rome at this time. He loses everything he has during the sack of Rome. And so a few years later, he moves to France. Now, in France, the king at this time was Francis I. Francis I was the king who had taken in Leonardo da Vinci at the end of his life, and he was like the ideal patron for a Renaissance artist, because he was like, with Leonardo da Vinci, he was like, you know what, I know you're not really reliable as an artist that's actually going to get anything done, but I think you are amazing, so here's a castle and just enjoy the rest of your days. So this is how he was with Leonardo da Vinci, and he was obsessed with the Renaissance. Obsessed, okay? He will also be the king who will marry his second son to one of the Medici ladies, so to Caterina de' Medici, okay? We'll talk more about that in another video. So obsessed with the Renaissance, he hires a lot of Renaissance artists to come and live there. And so when Leonardo da Vinci dies, he continues to have other artists move to France to be with him. And that is where the school of Fontainebleau starts. The school of Fontainebleau is basically what brings the Renaissance, the late Renaissance, so Mannerism, to France, and starts to kind of expand Mannerism throughout France and through other parts of Europe, okay? And it starts really with Rosso Fiorentino coming there. The problem is that whilst this was great if you were Leonardo da Vinci, Rosso Fiorentino's experience of this was very dramatic. Drama is the word of the day with Rosso Fiorentino, okay? Because he was not the only artist living at the court of Francis I, and there were a lot of other artists sharing the money that was going around and the commissions. And I guess it was kind of hard because doesn't look like these artists really wanted to share. Now, I don't know if it was just Rosso Fiorentino which was being so difficult, or if it was something just of the Florentine artists, but there started to be a lot of competition between the artists which had been called there, and this competition turned really kind of violent, okay? Now, Rosso Fiorentino is quoted as having died of suicide by arsenic. However, this is what, the only person that says this is Giorgio Vasari. Giorgio Vasari, who loves to, rabbit on about what's happening in other people's lives, is actually doesn't spare too many words about how this happened. He's just like, yeah, Rosso Fiorentino died of suicide by arsenic. He sent off this farmer to get him the arsenic and then he killed himself. The end. But if we look into this, we see that the weeks and the years leading up to this present us a scenario in which I'm thinking more killing by arsenic than suicide by arsenic, okay? So now, as I said, a lot of competition, especially with this dude called Primaticcio. Now, his name is Francesco Primaticcio, but I'm just going to go with Primaticcio. And he comes from Bologna. Now, the two of them were competing for all of the same gigs, and often they were painting the same rooms, doing the same stuff. I don't know why they just couldn't get along with each other. The descriptions of Primaticcio are also that he was just pretty chill, and that all the drama was coming from Rosso and his buddy's side of things. But it could have also been that Primaticcio was just very good at not being caught at being a dick, okay? So now, you have to think that at court, there was a woman who was the lover of Francis I, and her name was, my French sucks, so Madame d'Etampes. Anyway, Madame was the lover of Francis I, and she knew a lot about politics, about art, so nothing really happened if it didn't pass her approval. Well, not nothing, but it was difficult to live a happy life at court if you didn't have her approval. Not only with the arts, but also politically. It was said that if you wanted to be in the good books of Francis I, you had to be in her good books too. And she was often present at political conversations as well with ambassadors, so she was very, very important at court. Now, she loved Primaticcio, okay? So Primaticcio was her favorite artist. And this made it very difficult for Rosso to have to be his adversary, okay? Adversary, is that a word? I think it is. We're making it a word. It was difficult for Rosso Fiorentino to be contraposed to Primaticcio because he had this position and was friends with the lover of Francis I, okay? Then someone else arrives at court, another artist which is coming from Florence, which is Benvenuto Cellini. Now, Benvenuto Cellini, if you go to Florence, you will see in one of the main squares a sculpture by him, which is the Perseus. Benvenuto Cellini did a lot of work in Florence. If you cross the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, there's actually halfway through the bridge, there's a bust of Benvenuto Cellini. So he gets invited to France as well. And Benvenuto Cellini, now, the all-around consensus from who knew him was that he was a dick, okay? I mean, really difficult to deal with. He already killed 2 people in Italy before coming to France, okay? And he often got accused of sodomy, and which is perfectly fine, obviously, but I think that the way I've read it was that a lot of the accuses that he got for sodomy with young boys was more because it wasn't particularly consensual, okay? So, not a nice guy, as far as I can understand, all right? So he comes to France and he starts being, absolutely obnoxious as soon as he gets there. He does not make good friends with Madame d'Etampes at all, okay? There was this case in which basically he was commissioned to do this big sculpture. He was very good at his job, to be honest. Big sculpture of Zeus, and he had to present it. It was commissioned by Francis I. He had to present it to Francis I. And he apparently set up this situation where Zeus was naked and it was all made out of silver, and he covered like Zeus's privates with a piece of golden fabric, and he did it on purpose because he apparently knew that when Francis would get there with the lover, with Madame, we're going to call her Madame because I can't pronounce her name, Madame would get there, she would criticize by saying, oh, I bet you that you're covering that area of the statue because there's something wrong with it. And so he took it off and basically like presented her with, you know, Zeus's bollocks right in her face, and she got offended. So basically this massive penis of Zeus offended the lover of King Francis the First, and that kind of made it even worse for their relationship because it looked like he'd done it on purpose. Not really clear what happened, but there's literally paintings of her being shocked by the privates of Zeus sculpted by Benvenuto Cellini. Also, and this is important for our story, so Benvenuto Cellini and Rosso Fiorentino, they create like a team, Florence team against Bologna team, okay, at the court of Francis I. Now, you have to know that a lot of the paint which is involved in the paintings of this period contain poisonous chemicals, one of which is arsenic. So you can be an expert in in paints and in chemical compounds at the time, and that would also make you an expert in poison. So we have a lot of people living at court during this period, or a number of people who are expert in poison. And it's not like they're living there because they're expert in poison. They're living there because they're officially expert in these chemicals, which are used for a number of things. Killing people and making paintings, kind of for both, all right? One of these guys is one of the favorites, like someone that Madame really likes, and she's really good friends with him. He's also living in some rooms at the castle, which was given to, lent to Benvenuto Cellini. So Benvenuto Cellini says like, dude, I need these rooms to do whatever, so you need to go. And the guy, the expert in, toxic substances is like, I ain't going nowhere. And so Benvenuto Cellini, this is recorded in his autobiography. He says, well, because he was friends with Madame, I gave him a few days. I didn't want to start a riot, but then after a few days, I just went in and trashed all his stuff and destroyed all his things, basically. So the guy was just shocked and horrified at the behavior, and so runs to Madame and says, the guy, literally, he's quoted as saying, the guy is going to destroy Paris one day because he's so violent and a horrible person. So this is in the weeks leading up to the death of Rosso Fiorentino, okay? So we have his buddy, which is everyone hates, and who is not in the good books of a woman who is extremely powerful. We have someone which handles arsenic daily, who is been offended and has been kicked out of his rooms, okay? And then we have Primaticcio, which is the other guy which, you know, is a favorite of Madame, who is the painter, who is, you know, the other team compared to Florence team, which is Rosso and Benvenuto Cellini, okay? Primaticcio is sent off to Rome to buy some sculptures to take back to Francis I, the king. But we have a lot of Francescos here, so it's confusing. So, however, it is said that the king didn't really send him to buy these sculptures. He actually sent him to get him out of peril, because things were getting so heated here that it was considered dangerous for him to stay at court. And in amongst of all of this drama, this is when someone sneaks into the rooms of Rosso Fiorentino and steals a load of money, okay? Now, Rosso accuses his friend Francesco di Pellegrino. This is like the third Francis we're quoting here. And Francesco di Pellegrino is like, I did not do this. And apparently it is believed that he did not do this, but he is at this point very offended for having been accused by Rosso, and he publishes a booklet, basically like a diss track about Rosso Fiorentino, all right? And this is when Rosso Fiorentino dies. And it is said that he killed himself because of this booklet which was published, and because he feels guilty at wrongfully accusing his mate. Now, I don't believe this at all. I don't believe he would have killed himself by arsenic and that this would have been a reason to kill himself. I think he died by arsenic because of the intrigues surrounding everything that I've just described. However, we will never know truly. We do know that a lot of Florentines, when they got the news, so people from Florence were side-eyeing the whole situation and were very, very offended by what happened after, because what happened after this is that a lot of the frescoes which had been painted by Rosso Fiorentino were painted over by Primaticcio. So, do with this what you will, but I think that he was killed. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you think happened, because I even thought, like, what if he had a fight with Benvenuto Cellini? Because Benvenuto Cellini just sounds awful, okay? Or maybe he died by mistake. I don't know. Let me hear your thoughts, and remember to subscribe, and see you next time.